This is James Taylor, and you're listening to The Creative Life. The Creative Life podcast is a show created for you, the creative. If you're looking for inspiration, motivation, and advice while at home, at work, or on your daily commute, then this show is for you. Each episode brings you a successful creative, whether that's a musician, writer, artist, designer, performer, educator, or creative entrepreneur. They share their journey, their successes, their failures, their creative process, their insights, and much, much more. In this episode, I talk with improv comedian, performer, and coach Joshua Walters, and we talk about his Unplugged Day that's become a global sensation, the link between improv comedy and creativity, developing a wellness practice for yourself, his role as a creativity coach and what is a creativity coach, and digital fasting. Enjoy the episode. Hey, it's James Taylor, and I'm delighted today to have Joshua Walters. Joshua is a performer and coach who explores language, creativity, beatboxing, and mental health. He is a regular contributor to Snap Judgement, a weekly storytelling radio show on NPR with TV broadcasts on PBS. He is perhaps best known for his TED Talk entitled On Being Crazy Enough, which explores links between the bipolar spectrum and creativity. Finally, he recently launched a global day without technology called Unplugged, which sets out to highlight the benefits of disconnecting from technology. So Joshua, welcome to the show.
James, thanks for having me.
So share with our listeners what's going on in your world just now.
Well, there's a couple of projects that I'm doing. You mentioned the Unplugged Day, and that just happened on March 4th, just a couple weeks back. And that was all over the States here and a few places abroad. And I held a day-long improv comedy theater workshop where I brought in theater artists to teach different sides of theater. There were some youth groups that came through, and it was just a way for people to get in touch with their theater side and explore acting and the stage, some for the first time. And
how did you first kind of learn your craft as in comedy? And obviously I know now you've kind of moved into being a performer more broadly and doing coaching as well, but initially where did it kind of start on the comedy side?
Well, it all started with traditional theater for me, and I hit the stage at 10 years old. I did those little after school workshops that were theater based, and got into my first play at 10, and on through middle school and high school did theater the whole time, as opposed to sports. I was into sports as well. And then there was a split for me in junior high, right around 7th or 8th grade, when I was on the A team in basketball, and I left the basketball team for theater. And the rest of the basketball kids, they couldn't understand. They just couldn't get their mind around it that I was a starter on the basketball and I was going to leave it for theater. And this is just a personal choice that I did. And after that, I went to a performing arts high school that specialized in things like theater, film, dance, music, visual arts. And there's only a few of them, maybe 10 in the States, that are academic in the morning, and then after lunch, it's your art discipline. And this was a way for people to professionally train for the big universities that do arts, and also be prepared for the arts life post high school. Even a lot of kids just went straight into music production, straight into filmmaking. They were making music videos. There were pianos in the hallways, and that's kind of where I got my impetus to perform, being in that culture and that kind of environment.
So for a lot of people, being up on stage is a kind of worrying thing. And I heard someone the other day was talking about how it kind of goes back to evolutionary kind of ideas, where this idea of being in a open, exposed space with nothing to protect yourself and everyone looking at you is kind of, from an evolutionary perspective, it's an unusual way. But as comedians, you have, I would say, I know a lot of solo artists and a couple of comedians as well, and something you can share in common is there's nowhere to hide on stage. It's not like you're part of an orchestra or you're part of a larger theater group. When you're up there, you're on your own. So how is it always something that you've always felt quite comfortable with, or do you have to kind of work at that?
Well, yeah, like anything, you work at it. But like I said, I started really young. So at 15, we were doing Shakespearean monologues in front of the entire school. And that was some of the most terrifying experiences, to get up and do that. But then by 20, when I was hitting the circuit comedy in front of, a rowdy, at times disrespectful crowds in Oakland and other parts of the Bay Area, that wasn't as terrifying because I had gone through that very shocking experiences when I was young. And you mentioned something about evolutionary, and this was just recently said to me last month. But yeah, you're on stage in front of 1,500 people. Traditionally, 1,000 years ago, you're either at war or you're in danger. You're in as a human being, if there's 1,000 people there, it's like there's a famine. People are rushing the food stock, or you're at war. But it's not. It's chaos. It's not like something to relax with, But I think as performers, we trick ourselves to get comfortable. We say it's not a big deal, or one of my first coaches who coached me in spoken word and also in the art of yoga is that you have to align yourself with something bigger than yourself. And performers, like anyone, they have mantras that they say to themselves. They connect, whether it's religion or family or higher purpose or some sort of social cause. You have to connect with something bigger than yourself and kind of do it for that. It makes it easier. Makes yourself a kind of a servant of that purpose, And
in your TED talk, you obviously spoke about bipolar. And before we kind of get on to that, I'm interested to know, in terms of you going from just doing regular kind of performances, you mentioned Shakespeare, to going and learning how to do improv, which is a kind of, I imagine, is a different kind of set of skills. Someone was telling me recently that they did these brain scans of different folks in different work, and something that they found very interesting was when they looked at the brains, what was going on in the brains of improvisational comedians and jazz musicians. There was actually a lot of similarity, because it was something in the brain that was almost kind of switched off. The bit that kind of tells you no, you shouldn't do that was kind of was off in that part of the brain. So is that thing of being able to kind of free flow with ideas, is that something you had to really kind of work on, or was it something that you found it came very, very naturally to you?
Well, both. Yeah, I worked for a jazz station. My first college was a community college, and they had a jazz station called KCSM, and I worked at a jazz station and was introduced to jazz, and am still in love with jazz. Jazz maybe still is my favorite musical genre, and I love the spirit of jazz, that it is improv. It's music that is improv, and any type of music, any type of instrument can be jazz. But the spirit of jazz is that the music's coming through you, and it's you're improving those notes, much as a comedian who is riffing or doing crowd work is improving those notes. Now, the two are the same in that, a jazz performer who does a musical set, or a comedian who does a comedy set, they have their lines, they have their script, they have their things they want to talk about, and the improv moments interject in that to give it life. But you often wouldn't go up and do an hour of just improv. It has to be structured. There's some format to it. And I approach comedy the same way I approach jazz, that it's a spirit, that we're communing with the audience. It's an experience that's going to be for this one time. It doesn't have to be perfect. Some of those mistakes are in the glory and the beauty of the moment,
And how do so with music, with a jazz musician, they will have to develop a certain level of chops as a player to be able to do certain things, to be able to express what's going on in their head. For an improv comedian, how do you develop the kind of equivalent of musical chops for what you do?
Well, it's the same. It's the same. It's just different words. Like in jazz, you have a chord, or you have a blues chord, or you have a progression of notes that sound good in any order. Like there's certain notes. I'm sitting with my keyboard right now. Like there's certain notes that sound good as a scale, right? And so in that scale, I can play it in any order, and it sounds good because there's this scale. And so the scale, you can think of it as like a sentence. You have your sentence and it sounds good. And within that sentence, the way you play it, the timing, the rhythm of the sentence, of each word, of each note, is your own improv each time. And I think the mastery is kind of learning by default and learning by failure. The first thing I learned right off the bat and continue to learn is that the first time is the best. When you think of an idea, when you have a creative moment, a creative spark, the first time you're getting it out, the first time you're telling that story that's really important to you, it's the best. So how do you recreate those moments, and how do you have those moments that are the best and of this first time? Well, you go to your chord and you practice by yourself. You practice your sentence, your joke by yourself, and then you have one person over and you play it for one person, and then you play it for 5 people. And it changes on its own by having more people listen to it. We did a show. Me and the Snap Judgement guys did a show at the Paramount Theater just a couple weeks ago, and it was in front of something like 3,000 people. And those stories change when you're in a big audience. Sometimes they get softer. Sometimes the intensity gets less because there's so many people watching it. You have to tone it down. Whereas a room of 50 people, small ceiling, you can be as hot and extroverted and wild as you want, based on the room you're in, based on the people who's in that room. Something a performer doesn't often think is that the audience is giving you their energy as well. They're influencing you as well. You're not the only speaker or influencer. They're putting their energy on you, and you're reflecting that.
So do you remember that point in your career as a comedian where you kind of went that step beyond just kind of going and delivering what you'd practiced, actually kind of playing with the energy in a room? I mean, you mentioned chords there. So obviously in jazz musicians will put in maybe a tension. They'll put in certain types of chords that build tension, and they don't release that tension for a little bit. So maybe a comedian, you might have something, you'll open up a loop almost in something, but you won't release that. You won't kind of complete that loop in the comedy until a little bit kind of later on. Did you have a sense of when you kind of went from just being the comedian that was just kind of going up there delivering lines to actually someone that was really kind of flowing with it?
Yeah, and it's always a mixture of both. My comedic style started in the spoken word venues where you write out your piece, you memorize it, and it's very much like a monologue, like I was doing with Shakespeare's. It's very much like a monologue. And into that field, about 3 or 4 years in, I created a piece where there was a pocket for improv within the piece. So when I needed the piece to be 3.5 minutes, the pocket of improv was 25 seconds. But then when I went on tour, I would close with that piece, and that piece would become a 6 or 7 minute piece where the improv became half of the time I was up there. Whatever I did that day, whatever the crowd was doing, whatever. And people always were thinking, well, he's making this up. And I am, but there were prompts, there's cues. But, the beginning 2 minutes is always the same, and the last minute is always the same. And then there was this pocket where, when it needed to be a tight piece was 30 seconds. And when when I could take it on the road and we would close with that piece, it would be a 5 or 6 minute improv. And so I learned very fast by doing the one-man shows that those improvisational moments, the moments that are looser, create more space for laughter in some ways. There's more laughter when it's off the cuff. The thing that you don't know is how it's going to land, because it's not scripted. It could fail miserably. It could be horrible. It could be offensive. You just don't know how it's going to go. So you're walking that tightrope. And the best comedians as well as jazz musicians, they walk that tightrope where they have their lines, they have the material, and then they give you that spirit of improv, that spirit of jazz, to make it seem like it's a once in a lifetime performance, which it always is. You can't recreate, and it always is. And
you, in terms of taking risks comedically, I mean, I hear jazz musicians that say sometimes what they'll do is they'll purposely put themselves in positions where they go down a certain route with what they're playing, and they've got no idea how in the hell they're going to get out of it. But and for them, it adds a kind of a feel, a sort of tension kind of feel that they really enjoyed. Is it similar within the kind of comedy that you do, where you'll kind of throw yourself curveballs to see where you can go with it?
Yeah, I do throw myself curveballs, and going through that experience of a true bomb, a true failure, it's horrible, it feels horrible, and it is part of the learning curve. You don't learn by knocking it out of the park every single night. And Steve Martin says this in his book called Born Standing Up. He said the real fun of the craft was kind of learning what he was good at and building his set and kind of being that scientist on stage in discovering what pieces worked and what pieces didn't. And then once he had his hour and a half that worked, he just went on the road and just had to deliver every night. But it wasn't as much fun to do the 100% A-list stuff, hour and a half vehicle or machine that he created. What was fun for him, and I think a lot of people feel this way, is that the experimentation, the finding out what works, is fun. And I know a lot of artists who once they realize what they're good at in their field, they'll switch mediums.
Just to give themselves that challenge.
Yeah, they'll switch it up, and I do this too. My mom is an artist, and she does this as well. She was a potter for many years, and then she found her niche in pottery, and then she switched to charcoal drawing and did the pencil sketches, and just switching up the mediums of the art, of the visual art, to try something new, to be a novice again, to explore that field. Much is in the same way that I went from spoken word to music to comedy to improv to theater, just switching up a different medium. Not that it gets boring, but that it's like you once you've found your mastery, you've done your 10,000 hours, you know what works. Then it's time to try something else and fail a little bit, and you try something different. And
I'm guessing it's like having that experience of beginner's mind they talk about in Zen, where you'll have that feel, but also you can take things from maybe these other areas, and because you have a unique journey, you can then pepper that with the current thing that you're working on.
That's right. And the beginner's mind is always the most the most force, the most charge, and the most the best you can have out of your experience. Just like anything, just like any child experiences that ice cream flavor for the first time, you put yourself in that state of mind to experience it for the first time, and also be surprised. When you know it works, when you have it all figured out, it's not as much fun.
And so, talking about mind, in your TED talk, you talked about on being crazy enough. And you talked about your experience of being on the bipolar spectrum and how that related to creativity as well. And as I was watching, I was wondering whether you thought that your bipolar was a curse, or whether actually you felt it was, whether you were lucky to have it because it gave you something that a lot of people don't necessarily have.
Well, yeah, when you're in the experiences of being in the mental hospital, going through the whole medication game, seeing psychiatrists, having to be put in your own separate classroom, your IEP, which is an individual education plan, not being able to read or focus or sleeping all day and going through that whole experience, it doesn't feel like you lucked out, James. It doesn't feel like, you just struck the gold mine, and this is so great, it's so wonderful. And then for me, when I started to explore storytelling, I realized very, very quickly that this is a very powerful story. And it's a story that when I tell it as a first person, as first person narrative, and talk specifically about me and specifically about what I have gone through in the bipolar spectrum, it relates to a ton of people out there. And that has nothing to do with me. And people, individuals all over the world have experienced madness in their own frame and their own diagnoses and what they do with it, and if they even recognize mental illness as a real thing or not, or if they're on meds or not, or if they hate psychiatry, or if they love their doctor, or whatever their stance is. This story of being bipolar and going through that connects with so many people that I really had to take a step back and say, this is really my bigger purpose. We were talking about that at the beginning. This is really my bigger thing. That's a motivation. It's bigger than myself. It's something that I serve.
And you're talking there about the obviously with bipolar and then lots of forms of mental illness, the idea of medication and talking about how being concerned about the dampening of your personality and your creative edge as well by taking meds that you had to take as part of the bipolar. Where did you what's your kind of experience of that as a creative individual?
Well, yeah, I went through the whole gamut, and for me, there's a bunch of different things that I do that are sanity checks, that are ways to make my mood as calm as possible, or to use the creative spectrum and that hypomanic edge to get the writing done, get the acting done. And I have a very strict program that I'm on. It's very strict with routine, and I'm fine tuning it every day. It's never perfected. I'm fine tuning it every day, but it involves 5 Tibetans, exercise that I do in the morning, breathing work, qigong, certain dietary things, nature-based practices, and also being with people, being with friends. As an artist, I live a solitary life, create on my own, music and poetry on my own, and then I have to be with people every day, and then I have to be alone at some point every day, and read every day, and reflect every day. And it's just this life that I've chosen, or that's chosen me, because of my brain chemistry, because of this framework of being a creator and being a creative personality, that much in the same way as when I started theater class that first day, and they said, the teacher said, you are no longer a citizen. You are in theater now. You're an actor now. And this condition that I've been blessed with, cursed with, and then blessed with a second time is forced me to be arduous and kind of disciplinarian of my own mood and my own stability, of my own creative practices, of my own diets, of what I put into my body, and also to learn my threshold, to learn what is too much, to learn what's the breaking point, to learn when I spin out of control, to learn when others don't feel safe, when I don't feel safe, and to write that all down, in a plan. There's a great practice, which I'm a facilitator of, called this WRAP program, the Wellness Recovery Action Plan. And that's a simple program that anyone can do by themselves. You don't particularly need to take the class, even though it's a class I teach. And it's just a step-by-step thing where you write down your crisis action plan. What does crisis look like for me? What am I going to do in a crisis? What are the early warning signs of a crisis? How do I end those? How do I nip those in the bud before they become actual problems? And listing all those things. What do I feel? What do I feel when I'm good? What do I feel when I'm bad? Or getting to a place that's an emergency, so where it doesn't actually have to become an emergency.
So with this, obviously moving from the kind of meds world to finding other ways, environmental, in terms of in your environment, sounds like mindfulness practice, other kind of practices, nature related things as well. I've spoken to a number of creatives who, when I speak to them about mindfulness, they're always a little bit wary of it, because they're worried that if they go and calm this mind, calm this monkey mind that we have, that it's going to take something away from their creativity. What's your take on that about where kind of creative, this kind of link that is there between having a mind which is very, very kind of vibrant, or a mind that's calm, and also the creative process?
Well, James, my viewpoint is this: is that everyone takes something for their sanity. You take your coffee every day, that's caffeine. You drink a beer in the evening, that's alcohol. People are on opiates, methamphetamines, uppers, downers, whatever you want. And even someone who's a Buddhist monk living in the hills, they drink a little green tea that has caffeine to keep them up so they can meditate every day. And whatever you need to take, whether that's medication or whether that's the sobriety from your own creative juices, is your own drug. And even if you're on no drugs whatsoever, no medications whatsoever, your body is producing those things like endorphins, dopamine, serotonins. Your body is the natural producer of all those chemicals and rushes and religious experiences. It's all inside you already. Those pills, psychedelics, everything across the psychotropic spectrum are just ways to release those things in your own body. When you take acid, that's releasing chemicals in your own body that already exist. And people have different practices. Some people take mushrooms every year. Some people smoke weed every night. I don't have judgments on whatever you put in your body, whether it's a medication legally sanctified by the government, or totally illegal. That's your own business, and that's your own path. And I think it's a fault of a lot of creatives to say, a little bit of medication or a little bit of the doctor's orders is actually dampening my creative spirit, because real creatives, people who create in the world, they go at it like a job. It's a 9 to 5. They do it every day, and to do that, you need your morning coffee. You need your sausage in the morning. You need things that you need. You need your 10 hours of sleep at night, or your 5 hours of sleep, or whatever that is for you. And a real creative life is about functionality and consistency. And again, taking back to that Steve Martin book, it's a great read, Born Standing Up. He says it like this: the role of a performer is not to be an A+ every time. It's to be a B average and to give 80%, 100% of the time, because you're going to have great shows. You're going to have moments of insight, moment of genius. It happens to everyone. But being 80%, being a B, a solid B all the time, is what gets you to the top. It's what gets you big. It's what maintains you to take care of yourself, and it's also a way to function in a way that's a little more sustainable than just having the juices running through you 24/7, which doesn't happen to everybody all day long. It'll happen for 8 hours. It'll happen for 8 days, and then you'll crash and burn and have to kind of recuperate your own dopamines.
It reminds me a little bit of that phrase, inspiration is for amateurs, where this idea of like doing the work, people like Stephen Pressfield and writers like that who just talk about kind of doing the work, building up that kind of practice and enjoying the process. You mentioned Steve Martin, who obviously loves the process of working the thing, like being a scientist and trying to, okay, what's working? Is this working? Is that being truly in love with both the craft and the art of what they're trying to do?
Yeah.
And so when you do these live shows, I mean, you mentioned 3,000 people, then I would imagine you do this show big high because you go and do a live event and you get that feedback from an audience. I mean, what does that do to your mind in terms of coming off stage and then being a kind of regular going doing the laundry? Because we've had a lot of guests on the show who are successful, like rock artists and pop artists, where they kind of have to do that every night. And I've spoken to a number of them. They said that when they come off the road, they almost have to go into almost got a process of kind of weaning themselves off of that, because it can hit quite hard when suddenly you go home off the road, and every night is not about getting in front of people.
Well, yeah, James, things like doing the laundry and cooking for myself, I actually enjoy those as wellness practices. They're not chores for me. They're not things, I just have to do the laundry again. It's like, no, I'm taking care of myself. It's self-care. And it's very grounding for me as a creative who's often on the road to be in my own home and cook for myself, because it's the most simple way that I can take care of myself, And as far as the performance high, when I was in my 20s, the performance high was ridiculous, and I thought I lived for it, and I thought I would do it for the rest of my life. Now in my 30s, it's not about the stage time. It's about communing with the other artists backstage. And I do those shows primarily to hang out with my friends. I'm backstage. I know, 4 out of 5 of these guys. I love them to death. I never get to see them because their schedules are all over the place. And I get to sit and have a dinner with them for an hour or so before the show goes on. That's my favorite part of the experience now, is to hang out with those people who are like legends to me, and who are, the superheroes of the comedic world and storytelling world. And that's where the real fun is for me. And being on stage, it's a little more taxing. It's a little more like work. It's a little more like, I got to rein it in. I'm trying to read the crowd. I'm trying to do my craft, but it's also not this high, this enjoyable thing, which is a big part of the reason why, as far as identifying, I identify more as a coach now than as a straight performer. When I come to Europe this summer, in September and such, I'll be performing because that's how I make an income, and that's what brings people to the crowd. And then the real work is those people who come to the show and they're interested in what I do, or they're interested in exploring more of their own wellness practice, and taking them and having, Skype and also in-person time, and coaching one-on-one, and kind of mentoring the next generation of creatives, performers, people interested in their own creative spectrum, as well as mental health spectrum, and kind of working with them one-on-one as a coach, director. That's really what I see myself as now. And it was losing a little of that high from the stage, and also gaining perspective on why I do perform. It's to bring people together. It's to put people in the same room. It's to get people interested in a common idea, listen to the same story, listen to the same song, as a community building, creative placemaking, if you will.
So when you now coach different creatives, if they come to you with, let's say, they're feeling kind of blocked in whatever the creative thing is that they do, whether it's a writer or as a comedian or as a musician or as an artist, what are some of the things that you would work with them on in order to kind of get kind of unblocked and get into some kind of state of flow, so where they were actually able to create to a level again?
Well, a big thing that we work on is their wellness practice, what they're doing for themselves in their day, their own maintenance. And then the thing that we work on is the creative project, whether that's their book, their song, their album, their painting, their dance, their portraiture, whatever it is. That's the kind of focus. So it's not a psychological session where we're focusing on an individual. Hey, what's wrong with you? What's going on in your childhood? All that. It's more like, all right, we're going to work on these really concrete things that are wellness practices based, things that you can do every day, tools for your wellness toolbox, as we say. And then the focus, instead of being on yourself, your own psychology, the focus is your project. Oh, well, you're going to write that children's book. Well, did you do your 2 pages? What's your goal for next week? Are you going to do 3 pages next week? And it's the goal orientation, the orientation of the goals that we use is about whatever creative practice and whatever creative project you want to accomplish. So it becomes very goal-oriented.
So you don't necessarily need to, you're not maybe a visual artist. You don't need to know some of those individual disciplines, although you know people that have those, and you mentioned your mother's a visual artist, a painter, a potter as well. So with the way that you're relating to people is really a mixture of the kind of coaching, and also having that accountability buddy, I suppose. Someone
exactly.
That's there with you.
Accountability buddy. Yeah, accountability buddy.
Accountability buddy.
Yeah.
You've invented a word, or is that a word?
Yes.
I don't know.
Yes, we've invented it now, James.
There you go.
Now.
TM. Put the TM mark on it.
Put a TM mark.
Yeah. That's fascinating, and this is it sounds to me this is very much, you feel a really strong pull to help other creatives explore their own creativity and actually get their projects out there, because so many people that I speak to have this novel in their head, they have this art, they have this album, they have this thing, but they never actually go and produce it. They never kind of get it out there. It always kind of stays there. So a lot of the folks that you work with, are they're people who are professional creatives, or they're people that want to become professional creators, or they're people that they've got something in their head and they want to express it?
It's all over the map. I mean, I'm seeing a guy today right after you. He travels around the world for what he does, cruise lines, Circus Olay, one of the top people in his field. And, we're just going to sit down and hang and have lunch and decompress. And that's going to be our time. Other people approach me, they're more in the visionary stage, that they have an idea or they want to make this leap or this change. And I help them kind of put the building blocks for the first time. So, I don't make a separation between people who do it professionally for income and also just want to try it out or want to use that creative tool as something to focus on. We're all born with creative gifts. If you can walk, you can dance. If you can talk, you can sing, as the proverb goes.
And now you're kind of coaching with these creatives, but what was the best advice that you've ever received about living a creative life?
The best advice or the best comment I got wasn't a comment of you are so this, or you strike me as this. It was a comment for the future. It was a comment of what you could be, and it was just that, hey, you've got a lot of potential, and you could do really great things in your field. You could be someone great someday, but kind of putting it off, like you're not there yet, but you have a lot of potential to someday achieve something that's worth some merit.
And talk to us about the Unplug idea. Where did this originate from? And it's obviously it's growing arms and legs now, and it's become an international thing as well. But where was the germination of the idea?
Well, once a week I take a digital fast, usually on Saturday. Not really tied to any religious purpose, but could be. And I take the fast. Now it's more of an email fast, computer fast. The phone's still on for logistical purposes, but it's some sort of technology fast. I used to shut off all screens, take a bike ride, go swimming, meditate, be totally by myself until 5 p.m. And now it's a more of a lightweight technology fast, and it helps to reflect, and also kind of if I want to write something or communicate, I have a leather bound journal. I write the thing down in a real piece of paper, and this practice was really essential for my growth as a performer, my own maintenance, and then I wanted to design something that was an experience that people could do in this time, when maybe they are taking a digital fast once a year, once a week, once a month, whatever it is. And it's this Unplug is a improv game where players come together to build their own show from scratch. And it's a prompt. It's cue cards. It's a little bit of instructional. And I've been teaching around the States, traveling for it and going into classrooms and venues and things, and curating how people can come together to try their speaking, comedic, musical talents in an improv setting where it's a safe space to fail, a safe space to create, and ultimately a safe space to be yourself.
So now I'm going to ask you a question, which I ask all my guests, which in light of what you've just said, is a bit of almost against it. And the question I always ask, is there an online resource or tool like an Evernote that you love? So we've gone from being offline now to being online, or do you find that you've actually, by doing the Unplugged, you've really, you can, with the exception of email and a couple of tools, you live a pretty minimal, essentialist life?
Well, the Unplug format, or what I'm getting at the Unplug, is not to become a complete Luddite. You would never know who I was if it wasn't for my web video and my nice shiny website and all these things that we do online. That's just where it is. I think that the notion of the fast is to have a day a week or half a day, 4 hours, Saturday from 8 to 12 or 12 to 4. That's a non-computer, non-negotiable, non-work time for you. But yeah, the next day I got a bunch more emails and I have to catch up on that. And the name of the show in a tongue-in-cheek fashion is #Unplug, James. So, I mean, you can hashtag that and see all the fun things that people are doing on Twitter and Instagram that, it has to do with unplugging. And it's always really inspiring to me because there's my one show that's up there from a year ago, and then there's tons of other things that people have notions of unplug or what unplug means to them. And so, there is a website, the National Day of Unplugging, that's done by Reboot, where you can see people post their signs why they unplug. I unplug to be with nature. I unplug to eat fresh fish. I unplug to be with my child. Things like that. There's also a lot of other resources out there that help with mindfulness in an app-centric world. Apps for mindfulness. There's this Friday app where if you want to shut down on Friday and you want to turn your screen off and turn your thing, it just reminds you, hey, your phone's going to shut down Friday night. Saturday, you're going to have a day of unplug. You don't have a choice.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of things that have that. And then also Tumblr has been an essential support. I run my site through there, and that's a great network. There was a great mental health campaign that Tumblr had a couple of months ago called "Pass It Forward" and "Pass It On, Pass It Forward," where people would create a video that was to an anonymous person that they didn't know, as thinking they could need help, someone who needs help, who's in a hard place with their mental health, that's in a downward spiral, that's thinking about negative thoughts, thinking it can't get better. And it was these inspirational videos to the world, to people who were going through that. In that downward spiral that we've all been through in some form of another. And it was just like, hey, it can get better for you. This is what I did, and this is what I'm doing now. First person stories, stuff like that. That was a #Pass It On, #Pass It Forward, a campaign that Tumblr released that I thought was really cool. Stuff like that.
And we'll definitely put, if people are listening just now want to check these out, I'll put them on the show notes at jamestaylor.me. Just type in Joshua Walters in the search bar, you'll be able to get access to all these as well. If you could recommend, Joshua, one record or book to our listeners, what would it be?
Yeah, I have a bunch of records here behind me. I play vinyl in my spare time. For those who don't have anything to do with vinyl, a record player, I would like to recommend the concept of vinyl. I have only about 30 records or so, mostly inherited. And so for those who don't play vinyl, how it works is you can't just press a button and it just goes for hours. You actually have to get up and turn the record over every 20 minutes. So when I'm working, I'll play some Winston or some Aretha or whatever. And I have to get up and turn the record every 20 minutes or the music stops playing. And that's a way for me to actually get out of my chair, get up from my computer and turn the record over. So the concept of vinyl in itself is
That's great. It's a
recommend.
It's a bit like there's a thing called the Pomodoro technique. I know a lot of web designers use where they set it on their computer. After 20 minutes, it basically beeps. It almost like cuts off their screen. So they have to get up and stretch and do other things and then come back to it. So you've with vinyl, you've kind of got that.
I mean, the record stopped. Yeah, the record stops. I mean, it does that. It does that thing where it's like the side is over, and you have to get up and turn the record. So then, sometimes. When you're having people over or you're at a function, you're like, oh, that's not practical at all because you have to go change the record. But I think by yourself, if you're someone who's working at the computer at your home, having to get up and change the record every 20 minutes is actually like, it's refreshing because that's 30 seconds I'm not looking at the computer and I actually have to stand up.
So let's imagine someone has they've got their first record player, first vinyl player, and you're suggesting an album. What album should they start with to get them into the joys of vinyl?
let's go over to the vinyl. There's a vinyl that I like to play when I'm working. That's Winston Churchill, Autumn in the Spring, which is just, piano music that's not classical. It's not jazz. It's just kind of sounds like instrumental songs that are played on the piano. For whatever reason, that vibes with my work life. And then you mentioned a book. To throw out a book, one of my favorite books is called Anatomy of an Illness by Norman Cousins, which I constantly keep reading. Yeah.
Great. And I'll put all these on the show notes so people are listening and go jamestaylor.me and you can see these all in the show notes. So as we finish up here, imagine if you woke up tomorrow morning and had to start from scratch. So you have the tools of your trade and the knowledge and the chops you've acquired over your years, but you have no contacts, no one knows who you are. How would you restart?
It's a great question. I asked this of a friend of mine, like, what would happen if he lost his job, and what would he do? And his name is James, and he's a poet, and he said, I would sell all my possessions and become a monk, and move into a monastery and live the monk life. And there was kind of a startling response. Maybe not one that I would do, but I don't see any of the things that I've created or the momentum I've created in this world as having a limitation on what I do now, or they don't hold me to what I do now. And if I had to just start over, I would probably do exactly what I do every day, just without the internet fame, the respect, the website, the name, the face, and all that. And it wouldn't be anything spectacularly different than what I do every day. It would just be a totally clean slate to create a new persona, create a new life and a new image of whatever I wanted to create next.
Beautiful. And finally, Joshua, share the best ways that listeners can connect with you and learn more about what you're up to.
Sure. So I have a website, thejoshuawalters.com. You can just put me in that Google search engine, Joshua Walters, and find me. My email is on there. You can connect with me that way. And you can just find out what I'm doing through there.
Fantastic. Well, Joshua, thank you so much for coming on the show. I wish you all the best with your future projects and your coaching clients and everything else you've got going on just now. And I look forward to also joining the many people now that are making a regular thing of unplugging as well, because I think it's a great practice to have. Wish you all the best, Joshua.
Wish you the best, James.
Hey, James Taylor here again. And if you're interested in living a more creative life, then I'd love to invite you to join me as I share some of the most successful strategies and techniques that high-performing creatives use. I put them all together in a free downloadable ebook that you can get by going to jamestaylor.me. That's jamestaylor.me to get your free downloadable ebook on creativity.